Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Katie Summerville and this is Andrew Bohnet. And today we have our guest, Wendy Fischnaller.
But before we start, Katie, you have a very important question.
Yeah, so Wendy, your LinkedIn profile says serving a life sentence in tax technology. So I ask you, are tax people boring?
I mean, it's a stereotype, but stereotypes are often there for a reason. However, I think where Andy and I fit in the tax technology space, we're definitely not boring. It's constantly changing. There's lots of innovation. And I have to say that even when I have to sit down with a VET technical colleague and really go into the detail on a scenario or a treatment, I don't find that too awful either.
Yeah, I think it's something which, we say every time, tax touches everything. And so therefore, it's always every day is a different scenario. And yeah, I don't think you can ever be really boring. There may be a few people in the industry.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Let's be honest. But I would say, if you think about where we're going, it's by far the most interesting area. I mean, e-invoicing solutions are going to have to gobble up like procurement solutions, because you don't need a procurement solution if everything's going through the government, right? So what's going to happen? So I expect that we'll see more and more of this in the space as things evolve.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Foresight. Foresight or persuasiveness, one of those two.
That's an interesting one, persuasiveness.
But I suppose yeah.
I've never heard someone say that before, to be fair.
Yeah, that'd be quite good.
Yeah. Imagine if you could get anyone to kind of bend to your will.
Obviously, you travel a lot, or you have traveled a lot at least. So what is one item that you can't travel without?
Passport.
I mean,
obviously. I will tell you that I bring my Dyson air dryer or my whatever.
Yeah, air wrap.
I mean, I have really shitty hair, so I kind of have to bring something that will make it look a little better. So I do travel with that, which is obviously stupid, but the one thing.
Sticking with the travel theme then, so what is your favorite travel destination? Where's your favorite place that you've been?
Thailand, Koh Tao, the island of Koh Tao.
Yeah, it's beautiful there.
It's like a hippie beach diving resort, so very low key.
Okay, so what is your tax ick? Like the biggest cringe thing that makes your skin crawl about tax?
Well, okay, I have two. First one is when I was at Fabric, Portland is located right on the border with Washington, right? And Oregon doesn't have sales tax, as you guys know, and Washington does. And one of the people that worked there was like reporting her neighbors for buying their cars in Oregon where they wouldn't have to pay sales tax. And you know that because there is an Oregon plate on it. If she saw an Oregon car too often, she was reporting them to the Revenue Authority. Oh. So that's like next level icky. Like, it doesn't matter what your job is, like, you don't report your neighbors. Anyway, but I would say probably the most pervasive thing in the industry is that tax doesn't have a seat at the table. I mean, it's a significant cost, compliance risk that a business can face. I mean, in terms of loss of reputation, everything like that, and they're still being ignored. That's probably the ickiest thing about indirect tax.
That's actually been quite a common theme, the lack of understanding of what tax does, to the point where, when someone, from legal is involved, you're like, I have to do this because I could lose my job if I do something wrong. Whereas with tax, it's, well, if I do something wrong, it's just the company that has to pay. And I think, so I don't think tax are seen as necessarily that important, even though they're so important. And tax should have should be part of every single project, every single process. They should be right at the beginning, involved. If IT are buying a new product, they need to check to see if it has a tax implication in terms of the data being processed, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're doing a project, it's a different country, they need to be involved to see if there's any tax liability, in that country. If they're launching a new product, they have to be involved to see if that product has different tax treatments and so on. So many times they're just not included until either the very end, or can you sign off on the project?
I was going to say that. Oh, but just sign off. I mean, that's happened so many times. That's the worst thing you can do. And for tech people, most of them are now starting to kind of defend their territory. I think they know what's coming. They're fully aware of how painful their job's going to be if they don't start working on the issues upstream of tax calculation or upstream of compliance, let's say. So yeah, it's definitely one of those areas that I continue to be surprised by, even as organizations. I mean, think about the cost of tax, indirect and direct, to a business. It's like 40 to 50%.
Being someone that's been in the industry a long time, and I mean that in a nice way, and you've worked on sort of both sides of the fence, in terms of consultancy, working for the end client, working for the integration providers. How much do you think it's the fault of the integration provider, particularly if they're implementing, say, Oracle or SAP or Workday? How much do you think it's their fault because they don't even want to include tax on the statement of work? They want to do the bare minimum, take exactly what you have, chuck it in, and then walk. So it's no work for them. Do you think that's a major problem as well? So it's not even just about involving tax. It's almost that those integration partners are purposely not wanting to involve tax because they know how much work it could bring.
It's completely right. That's why so often you see the SI, and then alongside is a tax transformation team, such as Innovate, or maybe someone from the Big Four or someone else from a boutique firm, and they're basically having to force that issue. The challenge is that then you have 3 people making decisions, and one of them owns the source system, the other one owns the destination system, or the system you're calling. And to get those teams to work together, if they're not really basically contractually obliged to, is very challenging. I mean, but then there's the other side of it, in that I've always appreciated that tax at least had someone that was playing defense for them, right? Like when we're standing outside of the IBM, Accentures, or whoever the SIs are, we're more able to provide a better level of service for them because we're pushing their agenda in the best way that we can, just with slightly less power.
Yeah, I think it's about that communication. It's about the involvement it's getting, as you say, that your ick. How do you advise someone from tax to get a seat at the table? So if there's a new integration project going on, what do they do to make sure?
I talked to a woman at Salesforce and tax at Salesforce. She works in the e-invoicing area. And she said, and it really had me thinking, basically, and this is a finance thing. Finance wants to know what's going to be disruptive to their cash flow, right? So as the tax team, what you really have to think about is not in terms of, oh, I have this obligation and this is so painful and it's so much work for us, because nobody cares, unfortunately. What they do care about is KPIs like days sales outstanding, DSO, or margin, or anything like that that you can really go after. So here's an example. You kind of discover that it takes you, 6 man-hours, let's say, to correct an erroneously reported e-invoice, or to amend a return because you didn't have the correct data in order to file a return. Whatever it is, you figure out the number. Start to assess what the cost of that is to the business, and more importantly, if it's actually delaying either VAT recovery, it's impacting your provision, anything that's going to impact the actual numbers that the CFO is going to see. That's what you want to go after. It doesn't matter that it's painful for you. It matters that it's painful for the business.
Changing the message to who you're speaking to. So whether it's finance, whether it's the business, whether it's IT, they have, as you say, they don't care about the tax. So you can't just say, look, we have to be compliant. They're like, you have to change the message. Say, okay, this is the financial savings, or this is the entry savings, or this is the maintenance, savings, or things like this that then resonate with the various teams. So you have to be a bit of a chameleon in changing how you deliver that message.
What would you say has been the biggest change in tax technology since you started?
I mean, as Andy said, I've been around for a while. But if you think, okay, let me just put this in perspective. Paper returns, I filed paper returns in one of my first jobs, and cut like physical checks that I mailed to the property tax authorities in the US, right? When we started using Excel in larger volumes, that was considered automation. So that's where I'm starting from. And most of the people that are kind of at this level, the heads of taxes, the CFOs, we're all, that's what we've experienced, right? So if you think about where we came from there, and that at the time when Andy and I were really taking off with the tax technology side of SAP and Oracle and R12 and ECC, that was considered to be a really big deal, to automate taxes in a way that it wasn't a manual job on every single one. And then think about where we're going next. I mean, this is like, it's API first, AI enhanced indirect tax. Like that's where we are. Actually, we're starting on down that road already. And this is that's in 20 years. And if you think about, Katie, what you're going to see in the next 10 years or 20 years of your career, because it's going to get so much faster. Everything is going to move faster from you, exponentially faster than it did for those 20 years. So it's pretty amazing to think about what we're going to see in the future. Generative AI, definitely. More machine learning we've been doing for a while, but I think we'll see more and more of that. And what I'm looking for in my tax engine is like a large language model, absolutely. And then some sort of an AI hybrid where that you can reason through the unfamiliar scenarios, right? That's the biggest problem in engines today. You set them up, you walk away, and then new business comes, new flows, new scenarios. And that is a real effort to maintain. And that's why 3 years down the road, nobody really likes their engine anymore, but it has nothing to do with the engine itself or even the implementation. It's the pace of business outpaces the ability to maintain those systems. So now we've got to use AI to figure out how that will then, and I am not going to answer that. I have some ideas, but this is for specialists, how we're able to then kind of have an engine and have other solutions here that kind of self-heal or work out what's new and figure out how to deal with it and get smarter and smarter. And that means for us who are in the industry, we get to do way more strategic work, more consulting, maybe designing new products. It leaves us free to go do other things that might be more enjoyable or more important.
But first of all, can you tell us how you got into tax? Was it your, lifelong dream, as a child to go, I want to be a tax consultant, or did things?
I mean, absolutely not. I actually started in sports marketing in university. And then I kind of saw the jobs the people that were graduating were getting. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work for me. So I took a couple tax classes and realized I actually really like tax because it's very logical, right? There's a reason that taxes exist. And it's punitive sometimes because they want to make sure we don't do some behaviors. It's beneficial sometimes because they want us to do other behaviors. And I found it interesting. So from there, I went and got a master's in tax, which then allowed me to come back into the Big Four, as you do when you're just graduating, on the tax side instead of on the audit side. I still had to do an audit. I did an audit of the Portland Water Bureau, actually, which was really interesting, but I still had to do that sometimes for my accreditation, but I managed to stay on the tax side.
And when you did the master's, was that more on the legal side, or did it?
Yeah, it's the LLM of a JD LLM, exactly.
I've known you for quite some time. You've done a lot of work on the implementation of tax technology. So can you talk a little bit about your journey from where you started to how you got to where you are now? Because what you're doing now is much more, it's like an influencer almost, right? It's someone sat at the right top, trying to make change and how that change impacts business and trying to get companies to adopt that change as well. Obviously, starting out, did you start off, for example, Big Four? Did you work, in-house? What journey have you taken?
Yeah, good question. So I started at KPMG because that's where you start, and I did 2 years there, and I was doing banking provisions, which is really awful, really, really tough stuff. Because you end up doing what the partner asks you to do. Whatever partner likes you for whatever reason, that's what you end up doing. And then I got a call a couple years in because there was a startup that was looking for researchers. And I had done a lot of that in my master's program and wrote some articles and things. So it just kind of was like logical that I might be interested in that. So someone contacted me and I went and interviewed. My parents were like, please don't take a job at it. This was back in the days when startups were scary. But I decided I just had to do it. I really liked the vibe of the company. I liked the people I was talking to. So I went in there and did content. I built the EU, I built Canada. I helped with the Java, the pseudocode for the Java logic that sits in Sabrix, which is now Thomson Reuters OneSource. And then we sold it to a couple of big oil companies. And one of them, we did a custom development with SAP. And that's when I started on my journey with SAP. I did not at that time, fully admit, did not understand the source system implication on the engine. Yeah. To us, working at Sabrix in the early days, the engine was like, that was it. You just needed that. you didn't really think about what was connecting to it. And I still think there's some people that actually work in these organizations that still think about the engine on its own, where it needs to fit in the bigger landscape, right? I think you probably have experienced that quite a bit. Like, well, the engine does it. Well, the engine doesn't do anything if the calling system doesn't get to it. So then from there, I went into more of the product side. So I led their custom development with SAP alongside of a colleague that was working on the SAP integration. And we built an engine that was also suitable for Exide, which was really fun. And that brought me to London. And then that program got canceled, but at the same time, another oil company bought it and they needed somebody to run their rollout. And that's what brought me to London. And kind of, I left Fabric and I went and started to do implementation, which was great. That was back in the days when, as a consultant, you would get flown back and forth and business doesn't happen anymore.
E-invoicing is obviously a really big area at the moment. One I would like to talk about is how new technology can replace old technology, or how we replace the way we're doing things. And you mentioned, e-invoicing to the point, and I think a lot of governments are not using it enough to really help the taxpayer. But ultimately, you could be in a situation where if all of the invoices being uploaded, then of course you can download them all. And a company could say, we don't accept any invoices unless we download it from the tax authority. If that's happening, then that pretty much does away with, the payables, the data entry, invoice scanning, optical recognition. What's your thoughts around that? And, is that a good thing? And how?
That's where it's going. There's going to be, basically, I use Ariba because I know at their SAP Ariba. If you think about what Ariba does today, which is basically provide you a place for your vendors to maintain their information, to upload or EDI through EDI their invoices and everything like that. And the future is that has to all go through the government and then come into your system. Why do you need Ariba anymore? Ariba will have to keep up with this in some way or nearly become an e-invoicing solution, because the future of it is that e-invoicing is going to be your ability to issue an invoice and get paid, and your ability to pay your vendors, to receive an invoice and pay your vendors. That's it. It's that fundamental to the processing of a transaction in a business. Like, there's no question that's where it's going. How quick it gets there, it really depends on where you are, where you operate, how big you are in a lot of locations and things like that. But that's coming. So knowing that, how do you get there? But I fully believe that the way things are moving, that your e-invoicing solution will be so central to the indirect tax function. That's why it's really imperative that you think about who you choose and how you do it. Because if right now you're on we'll just do them one at a time and use local vendors, your life is going to be really hard. And I would not stay in a business that's approaching it that way. I'm just like, please find a better job. Find a different job where they're not approaching it that way. Because it's one thing in South America to do that. If you're doing that broadly across Europe and you continue that, and you've got 30 systems to log on to find errors and get data, please, that's not a great way to be.
But saying that, because obviously the mandates and the rules are going to be slightly different for different countries, and obviously some companies have smaller operations in certain places, like places like Brazil, for example, they quite often do their own returns, local vendors, etc. So do you think at the moment any of the e-invoicing products that are on the market have the capability to deal with e-invoicing on a global standard yet?
No. Fanoa will be there at the end of 2026, because basically we're doing Peppol this year, so we'll kind of match what a lot of the providers on the market with the B2G and B2B of Peppol. And we have already had the B2C. We have the best coverage for B2C anyway, because of our driver operator, our gig economy company that we're servicing. I am not sure what the others plan to do, whether they will actually plan to expand to do B2C or whether they're going to continue focusing on B2G and B2B. We'll have to see. But I do believe that there will be a number, at least Fanoa and other ones as well, that will come out in front in the next couple years, and we'll really see that because they put the momentum on the procurement solution that we're developing, connecting up to Peppol, expanding our coverage, like they're going to match every single global requirement by 2026. That is the intention of our business. And the way that we've architected ourselves, we're able to do that because it's new tech, not legacy tech. So we're able to do that. I think everyone else must be considering the same thing and realizing that this is where this is going. Their ability to get there, I question. We'll definitely get there, but they're trying as well. I think you just have to be really choosy about who you look at. And even if you're an SAP and you want to do DRC, absolutely. If that's all and they've got the coverage, because they don't cover everything, and you've got the IT resources to keep it maintained and everything like that, that can work. But any of us that are in e-commerce and have a marketplace and over here a billing system, you can't. It makes it much more difficult if you're trying to you can't do it through SAP.
So for companies or people trying to select an e-invoicing product on the market at the moment, what would your advice be in terms of the key things that they should be looking out for from these products?
To work with, like innovate, someone that can help them really scope it and consider what's coming. We have a lot of really good mandates out there, mandate information on our site. Everyone issues a lot of, here's the new mandates and things like that. Take a look at not e-invoicing mandates, but your footprint against the mandate. And that's what's really going to help you to think about how you're going to step into this. I know that, I say I'm really strong pro-choice vanilla. There's other providers, but it's all down to the vendor selection team that you select and how they uncover not only what you need today, but what the scalability of that. Make sure you keep a real eye on the scalability. Is this going to be able to hit everything that we're doing globally effectively? And that's the big question, because some of the e-invoicing companies are really good in a few countries, they're really good in South America, or really good over here, but there are a few that are really good globally, and that's the ones you need to look at.
We always advise our clients to, when they're setting up their tax solution, to keep it global, not local. And what I mean by that is, even if they're in one country, it's having a standardized setup, configuration, naming convention, and everything else, so that when you are determining tax in your own ERP, everything is the same. So therefore, you look at a tax rate, doesn't matter what country it's in, it's standard rate, it's the way it's been structured, named. Therefore, it makes it easier to process data, to look at data, and everything else. Do you find that is something where being able to standardize the data, to be able to bring it into, say, for example, e-invoicing, is really important, but also the data that then comes back from the tax authorities? Because if that e-invoice transaction has failed, how do you deal with the exception reporting? And then how does that, potentially? So what do you think are the key components to look out for, not only just by choosing a provider, but also how you set your ERP up to be able to manage things like exceptions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coverage is fundamental to it, but the error handling and how you resolve those errors is critical. So as an example, a lot of the e-invoicing solutions on the market are just pipes. They're not doing anything. They're just sending data across. That's all they are. They're piping. Now, Fanoa has ingestion, and then it has an enrichment capability, because basically we don't expect every source system to have everything it needs. Oracle and SAP, probably. Billing system, e-commerce, probably not. So we basically have an entire enrichment system that we can do standard enrichments, like assigning the document type in Turkey and things like that. But we can do extra enrichments. It's like their providers, or the tax technology implementation team says, these guys never have this data. It fits over here. We got to bring it together. We can help with all of that inside the system. So that's kind of the first thing, is like, what do you have and what do you really need, and what is the capability of the source system? But on the error handling side, this is critical, because if there's a process, so I have a three-legged stool. You have to have your data ready, you have to have your process ready, and you have to have your system ready. Like, those are your readiness, three-legged stool for readiness. Anyway, the point is, it's like the process of resolving those errors is already difficult enough to get kind of defined, get everyone working together. Who is it? Is it procurement? Is it tax? Or sales, procurement, or tax? Any of the three. And then how that's done. But more importantly, it's the source system or the invoicing system giving you what you need. So we've standardized our errors, everything into English, because we know that's the language that most businesses use, even if they are consolidating the function in India or Malaysia or somewhere else, they're able to use English to basically look at it. So even if it's coming back in Japanese, we're giving it to you in English. We also give you the Japanese version. But the point is, like, make sure that however the system that you're looking to use is sending back that error messaging, and that it's going to be in a way that your source system it's usable. Usable by whether it's people going into the system itself and pulling it out, or whether you're getting it through BTP and into SAP, or whether you're getting it into your Oracle UI. I don't know where it's in Oracle, but that's really important that it's giving you in a format that your business is going to be able to use.
Do you think you've already mentioned, the concept of a tax ERP, and we all know that if you have a really good tax solution in place, it becomes the backbone of your financial system, because it's not just about calculating the tax, it's also about the control of the data. Do you think some of the providers, such as yourself, will eventually end up putting so many sort of modules in place that they become a new type of ERP with tax as the center?
I mean, that's where it should go, right? Because if you think, well, not necessarily the whole ERP, because ERPs do so much other stuff like HR and a whole bunch of stuff like that. But when it comes to the transaction, absolutely, it has to be core, right? Everything is around tax. Tax makes it all happen. Tax is going to drive exactly how quickly you can get the invoice out and everything else. So it does make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, the ERPs are distinctly disconnected from tax. So what does that mean? Does that mean we basically need like someone innovative, like a Workday or something, to maybe take up that lead and start to see how it would work? Be interested to see if you guys are working with them. And then, or a completely new solution. I actually did talk with someone who was kind of building an ERP in the States. I have to go look at who it was again, but they were looking at exactly this, like what do I need to think about for tax? And I went through you would do it too. I went through the normal things. Like, this would be my advice. These are the things you want to think about. But it was, I think it was also very open, because really, if you're going to do that, it needs an Andy or a Wendy or, someone that can really fit in every single decision that they make and make sure that they're thinking about the tax component. That's the only way it works. So I'm not sure. Is that feasible?
I think it's potentially feasible if you make tax part of the processes. So, it's the same as with AI, right? You shouldn't take the answer that AI gives. You should use it as say, okay, no, I think that's right. Maybe do a bit more research, because there's a huge problem with hallucination in AI, right? And you're going to see documents being presented. You're like, well, that's wrong. And because someone's just been lazy and they've chucked it all in and they've just gone, oh, well, AI knows. And so I think what you want is that human check. So if you're using AI, you want that human check to say yes or no at the end of the day. So that AI does all the donkey work and you use it to be able to do your job quicker. And I think it's similar to having the tax department involved. You say, right, we're buying this new product. It's to do with, counting fish. And tax going, no, it's got nothing to do. We're fine. Go ahead. But if they say we're buying this new scanning tool for invoices, you'd be like, well, wait a minute. Well, where's the tax determination? We hadn't thought about that. Yeah, exactly. So now we need to look at this in the right way. So I think if you get tax involved in that process, then maybe you can, drive things in the right way. And I think someone mentioned that the problem with the rest of the business is that they're driven by their KPIs. Yeah. So add the tax into the KPI. So it's finding a way to do that. But ultimately, if you can add that into the KPI that these things have to be done, then all of a sudden it isn't just about tax. It's actually, this is what's needed for, by the business.
Yes, it's about identifying with a KPI that finance has, or what is the tax impact, what KPIs fit in tax that are the impacting that. So I mentioned my daily sales outstanding. How fast am I going to get paid? How fast is it going to get invoiced to get paid, right? So there is significant impact to tax. Tax has significant impact on that number. So understanding what sits below it is really important, so that then tax says, okay, these are our KPIs because these influence this one KPI that CFO has. And I would prefer that they're sitting up next to them, but if in the normal structure of most businesses that are, below, let's say below 1 to 2 billion, where you don't have tax sitting in the table, that's the way it needs to be structured. But at the end of the day, the CFO has to take responsibility for those numbers, not just hang it on tax, because at the end of the day, the CFO is making all the purchase decisions related to tax's ability to deliver on those numbers or those KPIs.
So how have you found like your journey where you started, you were, doing project work, and now you're more about product design and that being, as I say, like more of an influencer. What's the sort of the biggest difference, and what did you enjoy about doing the project work where you're actually implementing and making things work to what you're doing now where you're innovating?
I mean, it's a great question. I think I loved doing projects. At the end, I started to kind of unravel a bit of just like, it wasn't challenging me anymore. And I think everyone kind of hit that at some point. Like, it was great being the smartest person in the room, but I was just in the room. I wasn't ever influencing anything outside of that. So at some point it just kind of began to wear me down. And yes, and I intentionally came back into product or into software, into the technology side of it, instead of going in the big four where more consulting would have been needed. But I ended up in sales. I don't know how. That probably wasn't intentional. It was more just like, this is who I would like to work with, and this is what I would like to do, because I really, like, I'm more of an evangelist, let's say, as you said, an influencer. So I do believe the path doesn't have to look linear to be intentional. This is the advice I always give everyone who's in this area. Even if it looks like you're jumping around between indirect and direct, there's a lot to learn here and there's a lot to do. And wherever your path goes, you will get something out of it every single step along the way. I fundamentally believe that. And I think it's like, so I had a denim startup. I've done a lot of tax transformation projects. I've worked really detailed with SAP, and now I'm doing partner stuff. So I really like, evangelism. The common threads are there, right? I'm very curious. I refuse to stay in a box that someone gives to me. I'm definitely a tax expert, but I am super passionate about what we do. And that passion is through all of the things I've ever done. I believe in it. I believe in the space. I believe it continues to innovate itself. And it's very interesting to me. I like being in this space. And real impact happens really when you start showing everyone why we're here. And I think this is the time where technology especially is in its kind of heyday. Everybody is now saying, oh yeah, that's why we had a tax technology person on the payroll. And that's huge. It's huge to be part of that.
No, absolutely. And actually you create a link there. You mentioned about your denim startup, and that's something a lot of people probably don't know about you. So tell us a little bit about it and what made you start that?
Yeah, it's funny. When I moved over here, so I was working on as an external consultant with Shell on their global SAP project. And when I got here, I realized there's no denim brands. There was like, you guys in the US, it was like super booming, like all of these new brands made in LA kind of thing. And over here, you could just get like J brand and like a couple not great brands, right? Actually, brands that are made in Asia probably. And so I just thought, okay, I need it first, and there's a need. Obviously, there's a lot of fashion here. This is like definitely where it starts for Europe, right? In terms of fashion and style and everything. And I just decided, I'm going to make it. So I was called the Raw Denim Bar. I did it for 3 to 4 years. I had a lot of fun, did some magazine things, like lots of fun. I wouldn't say I made any real money because it was still in a startup mode. And then I got pregnant with twins. And Katie, as you know, that takes a lot out of you. And I just knew I wasn't going to be able to do it. I just knew. So it was kind of my baby until I had my babies, but it was tons of fun. But I will tell you a good tax story. I was audited because in the early days, we imported a lot of jeans that we then needed to sell. So I had my first VAT return with a lot of import VAT. And I was asking for a refund because we didn't have a lot of output VAT yet, right? So because I was asking for a refund, triggered audit. The little I call him the little tax inspector because he was probably like 30 and I was maybe 35. But I could tell I had way more tax chops than he probably had. I also knew that he was going to underestimate me because he had no idea that I had any tax chops at all. And basically he told me that import VAT is not recoverable. I'm like, it definitely is recoverable. And then I kind of talked through him. I was like, I do this for a living, so it's recoverable. Like you can go back and do what you need to do, but it's recoverable. And this is definitely a refundable position that I'm in. There's no doubt in my mind. I hadn't even prepared it. Like my bookkeepers had done the returns. But anyway, so in the end, like the next day they called. I think it was even later that afternoon. I can't remember, but it's definitely at least like the next day they called and were like, yeah, we're going to issue the refund because I had proven my point. So that it all tied together in the end. But I actually think now, I heard recently, where was it? Portugal. In Portugal, if the tax inspectors get commission for coming after your, for if they're able to reduce your refund or increase your tax, basically increase the tax you're paying. Which is crazy if you think about it. If that's actually true, it was a Reddit thread, so zero credibility, but that's what they're saying. And I was thinking, if that's really the case, did that guy just try to say that import VAT because they just expected me to go, duh, okay, that's fine? Or is it that he didn't know? To this day, I don't know. And I always kind of wonder, but businesses really need to know their VAT and that know their stuff. So it's good that there's tax advisors out there that do that.
Interesting one. And as you say, that's quite scary, really, because if you didn't know, then that could have a serious impact.
They've gotten a refund.
Yeah, exactly. But so with that, do you think running your own business, having the denim startup, do you think that helped you in your career in tax?
Yes. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the side hustle, side quest, let's say. Hustle, people don't like the word hustle anymore. It gives you sharp instinct. Like that's it. It just, everything that you do, you get a different perspective on things. So it made me really sharp on what I was doing. I loved it. It was super fun. I would love to be in a position where that's all I could do, but unfortunately, I just didn't marry rich enough. So that's really unfortunate. I have to keep doing this tax technology stuff. But I think for me, it was a lot of fun and everything like that. And I definitely believe in and having something that you do on the side that keeps you sharp.
But do you think that goes back to what you're saying about in the tax technology world, jumping around from the different jobs? So going from working on projects to doing product, like you say, everything you do gives you more insight, more information that you can then use at the next stage.
Yeah, and that, like you guys what you guys are doing kind of across the transaction life cycle as well. If you only do one thing, you're only focused on e-invoicing or only focused on one part of tax or one part of a business, you don't walk the shoes. I think the reason I'm like a really good partner person in the market is because I've walked the shoes of a consultant. I know what they're going through. I know what they need to do. I know what the business looks like inside of a big four. So it just makes me much more sympathetic to what they're doing. And then I much easier can instead of looking at what do I want them to do for me, I'm looking at what can we do to enable that. Like it's just a completely different view on it. So as a partner person, I'm completely different than other partner people for that reason. But for us, it's so important to if you just step out, have you ever tried to describe to your kids what you've done? It's really hard, right? What you're doing. Like the kids are like, I don't get it. But then if I just pull out an invoice and I'm like, see that 20%? I calculated that. Not really, but you know what I mean? Like it's so much easier if you just get it tangible. And so I think definitely running a business helps to kind of make everything more tangible.
My kids barely talk to me as it is. There's no way I'm going to start talking tax. Otherwise, that'll be it. They won't.
Yeah, it's over then, right?
And I think it is important. The more you can do, the more you can learn, the more avenues. You don't have to be a master, but it's knowing enough to be able to ask a question. It's knowing enough to be able to challenge someone's decision. I think that's
credibility is currency in this market, and you have to be straight up, ask the question if you don't know. Like it doesn't matter the consequence. Like credibility is very important.
If someone was to take a bit of advice from you, right? In a tax perspective, but also in a non-tax. So I want two bits of advice. What would they be?
Work your network. I mean, develop a network, spend time developing the network. I mean, I know you do this too, but you know how many calls I'd probably get even just every week on somebody asking me about a question. How do you do this? A lot of how do you do this in one sort, but as well, like, hey, I'm looking for something. I'm looking for someone. I'm like a connector. I like to do this. This is one of the things that I really like to do. There's always an opportunity around the corner. So make sure you really hone that network. And even if it's not your favorite thing to do, just spend time interacting with people on LinkedIn, connecting with people, going to events and things like that, because that is so critical as we go in this next stage, that you have people sounding boards. I mean, I think I've called you multiple times as a sounding board. Like, it's important to have people that you can talk to about this stuff, even if everyone else in the room thinks it's boring. But
Yeah, I really agree with that. And what I'd also say is, if you're, young, you're just getting into career, in 20 years' time, they're the people you're chatting to now. They're going to be the ones, signing the checks. And so that's why, the networking, you just start it as soon as you can.
yeah, absolutely. The second bit of advice I would say is, constantly learning. Even I'm doing that at my age and length of time in this career. I'm constantly reading, constantly looking at how people are doing things, constantly trying to understand the new technology and what's out there. I mean, I love AI and see how I can use this. This is the world for that. I mean, we don't have any choice. You have to spend time investing in yourself. So network, spend time outward and spend time inward. And I would say that's probably the best thing to do. And also, don't ever let someone get you to do something that you shouldn't do and you shouldn't do. Just absolutely not. I've heard some stories about people who early on in their career made decisions on different compliance things, and those feelings that they had of that wasn't the right thing to do, that sticks with you way longer than you want it to. So just always be true to yourself and what you think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think also with that, if you are the tax manager being asked to sign off on a project because none of the tax things are actually working, but you're now holding the whole project up, don't give in, because if they had actually involved you in the project from the beginning, they probably wouldn't be having those issues. So that would be something I would say is, don't just accept what the other business is doing to push you, into a hole that you're never going to get out of.
Yeah, it's really good advice. Yeah. And there's always someone to ask. Connect Andy, connect with me, there's lots of people I can connect to if you're looking for something, whether it's a question on a particular engine or the way Oracle or SAP works or whatever it is. There is a network of people out here to communicate and to talk to and to engage with that can support you.
Being obviously a woman in tax technology, and you've been in the industry such a long time, and obviously there is such a pressure or a stigmatism. I don't even know if it's a stigmatism. It's just such a hot topic, if you like. Every event you go to, there's always a women in tax tech piece there. What have you seen change in the industry for women in tax technology over the last few years? And what's your opinion on the importance of it being highlighted?
Generally speaking, I think when you're good at your job and you're effective at your job, then that's what you need. That's your currency. At the same time, I do believe that it is more challenging for women to get to the top level, not any other level, but to the top level. I don't know why that is, but if you think about it, a majority of tax people are actually women. I think it's like 60% are women, so not a huge majority. I'm not talking about like the Brazil gender inequality, but we're talking about like a pretty big percentage. And yet at the top, it's 90%, let's say. It's specifically in tax and in tax technology, I would suggest. That's obviously frustrating, as it should be, but there's a lot of reasons for it, right? Personally, women, they're not very good at self-promotion. I think most women would say they wait for the promotion to come instead of asking for it. That's a personality thing or a gender specific personality thing, it seems. I think as well, we have to jump jobs. You have to jump jobs to move up. Women we're more stable, we're more loyal. We've got the additional challenge that we want to have kids and we want to be somewhere well so that when we have kids, we don't feel bad about having kids because of course the guilt that comes with it. There's a lot of things that go into it. I like that it's highlighted. I don't think it's going to save any of us. I don't think it's going to give any of us our good jobs. We're still going to have to fight for them. And we're going to have to fight a little harder, not dirtier, but harder than the men to get there. That's my personal opinion.
I had a sort of a discussion about, women in senior levels with friends of mine who are actually in senior HR. And I was of the same opinion as Katie. You know, we don't discriminate. We've got lots of women in our team. It's all based on what they can do. But what they said is, I think, as you mentioned, it's women don't necessarily promote themselves enough. And what they said to me, they said, if there was a job going, a man would usually go, I could do like 25% of that. I can learn the rest of the job. I'll go for it. Whereas a woman would be like, I can only do 80% of that. I can't go for it. And I think that's what they said is the problem, because they want to encourage the women that can do 80% to apply for the job, as opposed to just having men can only do 15, 20%, you know, because they want the right person for the job. And it's more about who's actually applying.
Yes, I think those numbers generally reflect the state of most unions. Definitely my union. It's like my husband does about 20% and I do about 80%. I think that those numbers are kind of reflecting globally what's happening in the world, except for when it comes to crafting the economies, and then we leave that to the men to do. I mean, yeah, it's spot on. Women have to do better promotion. To be honest with you, probably the thing that hurts women the most is that we don't help each other enough. Men do that a fair amount, not all men, but a lot of men do help each other, and some cultures really encourage that. Women, for whatever reason, don't pull each other up, and we should be doing that every single time and helping when we see someone. You know, it's one thing I always do with the women in my organization. If I see something that I think could hold them back long term, I always reach out offline and be like, hey, you've said this a few times in different meetings. It's probably not what you want to be saying. Maybe try this. And it's just about always encouraging each other to be the best that we can be and show how strong we are without necessarily causing, I mean, I don't know how to say it without just swearing. Show how strong we are without just being bitchy or aggressive. Because unfortunately for women, it's a really tight line you have to hold.
It's definitely a fine line between the two.
Yeah. I'm on the wrong side of the line most of the time, but whatever.
Fine line isn't so much a fine line with Katie. We know where she stands.
I'm pretty sure most people would say that around me too.
But I think that's why maybe the Women in Tax Technology is there, because like you say, it's about creating the network to pull people up, you know, because there are, you know, not everybody's the same. So there will be people there that know how to encourage, to bring people up to say, look, no, go for that. You're absolutely qualified. And so so I think people that may look at it and say, well, that's sexist, or it's not. It's actually it's a support network to make sure you get the best out of.
I think it's a great movement in terms of building confidence, as you say, inspiring, creating those networks. You know, if there is a lack of confidence in women about creating networks, those types of events provide that safe space to do it in, right? And where they can build themselves up. But for me, I've always been of the belief at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter what gender you are. If you're good at your job, you're good at your job. It's just a shame not everybody, I guess, has that belief, and that's why things like this get created.
Yeah, that's it too.
So that brings us to the end. Wendy, thank you so much for joining. It's been a fantastic podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I know there's a lot more we could talk about that. Has to probably wait till the 9 p.m. watershed, but we can do that at another time. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
See you soon.